The video file was titled Lesson Learned, and when I pressed play, my soul went cold. I watched 8 masked men break down my front door, laughing as they dragged my teenage daughter, Violet, from her room. They didn't just hurt her. They filmed it, mocking me through the camera, thinking I was just a tired, retired single dad. They had no idea my tactical feed was live-linked to my old Tier 1 SEAL unit. My brothers weren't just watching, they were already tracking the scent. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I've spent 20 years in the shadows, operating in places that don't exist on maps. I've seen things that would make a normal man's heart stop, but nothing prepared me for the sight of my own living room turned into a crime scene. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, the blue light of my phone reflecting in my eyes as the video looped for the 10th time. My hands weren't shaking. In my line of work, adrenaline doesn't make you shake, it makes you focused. It makes everything slow down. I could hear Violet's muffled cries in the background of the video. I could see the way the lead man, a tall guy with a distinctive tattoo on his wrist, held the camera. He knew exactly where the hidden nanny cam was. This wasn't a random home invasion. This was a message. You should have signed the papers, Julian. The man in the mask whispered into the lens, his voice distorted but the malice clear. Now, you get to watch what happens when you hold on to things that don't belong to you anymore. I looked at the floor. My house was silent now. Too silent. Violet was at the hospital with the paramedics. Her physical wounds minor, but her spirit shattered. I had failed the one mission that actually mattered, keeping her safe. I stood up and walked over to my closet. I pushed aside the civilian suits and the soft flannels I'd worn for the last 3 years while trying to be normal dad. Behind a false panel in the back wall lay a heavy, reinforced steel case. I didn't need a key. My fingerprint was the only thing that could wake it up. As the lid hissed open, the smell of gun oil and CLP filled the room. It was the smell of my real life. I reached in and pulled out a sleek, encrypted satellite phone. It hadn't been turned on since I retired after that mess in Yemen. I dialed a number that wasn't in any directory. It rang once. "Talk to me." A deep, gravelly voice answered. It was Hunter, my lead scout, the man who had pulled me out of a burning wreckage in the Hindu Kush 10 years ago. "The nest was breached, Hunter," I said, my voice sounding like grinding stones. "They took a video. They sent it to me to humiliate me. They touched Violet." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. I could practically hear Hunter's heartbeat through the line. In our world, family was the only thing left that was sacred. You could shoot us, you could burn our records, but you never, ever touched the kids. "Names?" Hunter asked. "I don't have names yet. I have a tattoo and a voice," I replied, walking toward the window and looking out at the quiet suburban street. "But I have the ex-wife's fingerprints all over this. Brooke has been screaming about the estate for months. She's dating some local power player named Logan now. I think he's the one who gave the order." "Where are we meeting?" Hunter asked. He didn't ask if I wanted help. He didn't ask about the plan. He just needed a grid coordinate. "The safe house. The old mill outside the city. I've already sent the video file to your encrypted drop. I need facial recognition, gait analysis, and I want a full-spectrum sweep on Logan's private security. If he's using local muscle, I want to know what they eat for breakfast." "We're already moving, Julian," Hunter said. "Blake and Victor are with me. We'll be at the mill in 2 hours. Do you want them alive?" I looked at the empty hallway where Violet used to run and laugh, the place where she was currently terrified to return to. I thought about the masked man's laugh as he slapped the phone out of her hand. "I want them to understand who they actually robbed," I said coldly. "They think I'm a broken-down veteran with a pension. Let's show them the ghost they actually invited into their lives." I hung up and threw the phone on the bed. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I didn't even feel the betrayal of Brooke, though the sting of a mother's betrayal is a special kind of poison. All I felt was the cold, hard logic of a mission. I walked downstairs. The front door was boarded up now, the wood looking ugly against the pristine white paint of the house. I picked up a small, jagged piece of glass from the floor, a remnant of the struggle. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Brooke. I heard about the break-in. How awful. If you had just moved into the city like I suggested, she would have been safe in a gated community. Maybe now you'll realize you aren't fit to keep her. I stared at the screen. She wasn't even hiding it. She was using our daughter's trauma as a bargaining chip for a real estate settlement. She was working with Logan to break me down, thinking I was a weak link they could exploit. They didn't realize that I wasn't the weak link. I was the fuse. I grabbed my keys and walked out to my truck. As I drove through the sleeping neighborhood, I watched the rearview mirror. I saw a dark SUV pull out from a side street 2 blocks behind me. They were following me, probably making sure I was heading to the hospital or staying at a hotel. They wanted to keep the pressure on. I leaned over and flipped a switch under my dashboard, activating the signal jammer in my truck. The SUV's headlights flickered for a second as their GPS and comms went dark. Big mistake, I whispered to the empty cabin. I didn't head to the hospital. I didn't head to a hotel. I headed toward the dark woods on the edge of the county, where 3 of the deadliest men on the planet were currently landing a private chopper. The 8 masked men thought they were the predators. They thought the video was the end of the story. They didn't realize that the video was actually the opening credits to their own funeral. The transition from the suburbs to the old mill was like crossing a border between 2 different lives. The city lights faded in my rearview mirror, replaced by the suffocating darkness of the pine forest. The SUV that had been tailing me was gone. I'd lost them 3 miles back after a tactical U-turn through a construction site. They were amateurs. They were used to intimidating civilians, not tracking a man who had spent his career evading state-level intelligence agencies. I pulled up to the rusted gates of the old mill. It looked like a crumbling relic of the industrial age, but deep beneath the floorboards, it was reinforced with lead and fiber optic cables. I stepped out of the truck, the cold night air biting at my skin. Identify. A voice whispered from the darkness to my left. I didn't turn my head. I knew the barrel of a suppressed rifle was leveled at my chest. Ghost 6. Status. Broken seal, I replied. A shadow detached itself from a thick oak tree. It was Victor. He was a small, wiry man who looked more like a librarian than a sniper, but he had more confirmed long-distance hits than anyone in the history of the unit. He lowered his weapon and stepped into the moonlight, his face set in a grim mask of sympathy. I saw the footage, Julian, Victor said, his voice low and dangerous. Hunter and Blake are inside. They've already pulled the metadata. I followed him into the mill. Inside, the aesthetic changed instantly. The dusty, wooden exterior gave way to a high-tech tactical operations center. Screens flickered with satellite imagery and scrolling lines of code. Hunter was hunched over a laptop, his massive frame dwarfing the folding chair. Blake was cleaning his sidearm, the rhythmic click-slide of the metal the only sound in the room. "Look at this," Hunter said, not bothering with a greeting. He pointed at a frozen frame of the video the masked men had sent me. "We ran the gate analysis on the lead guy, the one with the wrist tattoo. His name is Quentin. He's an ex-cop, kicked off the force for excessive force and ties to organized crime. Now he runs a private security firm that's basically a gang of hitters for hire." "And who pays his bills?" I asked, leaning over the table. "A holding company called Apex Developments." Blake chimed in, looking up from his weapon. "And guess who the majority shareholder is? Logan, your ex-wife's new boyfriend." I felt a cold, sharp satisfaction. Seeing the connections laid out in black and white made the target clear. This wasn't just a crime. It was a business transaction. Logan wanted my coastal property, land that had been in my family for 3 generations, to build his new resort. I had refused to sell. Brooke wanted the divorce settlement tripled. Together, they decided that traumatizing my daughter was the most efficient way to make me sign the papers. "They used 8 men," I said, my eyes fixed on Quentin's masked face on the screen. They wanted me to feel outnumbered. They wanted me to feel like I couldn't protect my own house. They don't know who's in the house now, Victor said, tapping a touchscreen that showed a live feed of Logan's penthouse in the city. We've tapped into the building's security. Logan is hosting a charity gala tonight. Brooke is right there next to him. Show me, I commanded. The screen shifted to a high-definition shot of a ballroom. There was Brooke, wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than my truck. She was sipping champagne, laughing at something Logan said. Logan looked exactly like the kind of man who would hire thugs to do his dirty work. Expensive tan, capped teeth, and eyes that never stayed still. Watching her laugh while Violet lay in a hospital bed, afraid to close her eyes, triggered something in me. The normal dad I had tried to be for 3 years finally died in that moment. What's the move, boss? Hunter asked. The air in the room grew heavy. This was the moment where the mission parameters were set. We don't go for Logan yet, I said, my voice eerily calm. If we take the head off the snake now, the body just thrashes. I want to peel them apart piece by piece. I want them to feel the walls closing in. I want them to realize that every person they trusted is disappearing. The thugs first, Blake asked with a predatory smile. The thugs first, I confirmed. Quentin and his 7 boys. I want them snatched. No noise, no police reports. I want them to simply cease to exist in the eyes of the world. Hunter, you handle the digital blackout. I want their bank accounts emptied and their phones redirected. Victor, you're on Overwatch. Blake, you're with me. Where are we starting? Blake asked, holstering his gun. The gym where Quentin trains his security team, I replied. They think they're tough because they beat a teenage girl. I want to see how tough they are when the lights go out and the ghost comes for them. We moved with the synchronized grace of a team that had worked together in the darkest corners of the earth. We didn't need to discuss tactics. We were a single machine. As we geared up, my phone buzzed again. It was another email from Logan's lawyers. A final offer for the property, with a note saying that further delays could result in more unfortunate accidents. I didn't reply. Instead, I handed the phone to Hunter. Trace the IP of that email, I said. And once we have the first 2 thugs, I want you to send a reply. Just one word. What's the word? Hunter asked. Found, I said. We left the mill in 2 separate vehicles. The drive back toward the city felt different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. I thought about Violet. I had called the hospital before leaving, and the nurse said she had finally fallen asleep, but she was crying in her dreams. Every tear she shed was a debt that Logan and Brooke were going to pay back in blood and reputation. They thought they had sent a video to humiliate a father. They didn't realize they had sent a recruitment video to the most dangerous kill squad on the eastern seaboard. As we approached the neon glow of the city, Blake looked over at me from the passenger seat. You okay, Julian? I'm better than okay, Blake, I said, gripping the steering wheel. For 3 years, I tried to be a man I wasn't. I tried to forget the things I've done. But Logan and Brooke, they just reminded me exactly who I am. And who are you tonight? I pulled the truck into the shadows behind the gym where Quentin's men gathered. I turned off the engine and pulled a black tactical mask over my face. I'm the consequence of their choices, I said. I stepped out of the truck, the shadows swallowing me whole. Inside the gym, I could hear the muffled sound of music and the thud of heavy bags. They were celebrating. They thought they had won. They had no idea that the man they had humiliated was currently standing 10 feet from their back door, and he hadn't come alone. The back door of the gym was heavy steel, but the lock was a joke. Blake held a small electronic device against the keypad, and 3 seconds later, the status light turned from red to green with a soft, mechanical click. We didn't rush in. We moved like smoke, slipping into the humid, sweat-stained air of the facility. The smell of cheap floor wax and adrenaline hit me. It was a familiar scent, the smell of men who thought they were kings because they were the biggest bullies in the room. We stayed in the rafters, moving along the steel catwalks. Below us, 4 of the men from the video were gathered around a weight bench. They weren't training. They were passing around a phone, laughing. I saw Quentin, the ex-cop with the wrist tattoo. He was leaning against a squat rack, a smug grin on his face as he recounted the bravery of his squad. "Did you see her face?" One of them laughed, a thick-necked guy named Kyle. "She thought her daddy was going to burst through the door and save the day. Poor kid. Dad's probably hiding under his bed right now." I felt Blake tense up beside me. I placed a hand on his shoulder, signaling him to wait. In the SEALs, we don't strike when we're angry. We strike when we're ready. I needed them to feel the shift in the atmosphere first. I wanted the fear to marinate. "Hunter, drop the grid," I whispered into my comms. Suddenly, every light in the building died. The heavy bass of the music cut to a haunting silence. The only light left was the dim, red glow of the emergency exit signs. "What the hell?" Quentin's voice echoed from below. "Kyle, check the breaker. This place is brand new." "I'm on it," Kyle grumbled. We watched his shadow move toward the back hallway. He never made it. As soon as he stepped into the darkness of the corridor, Blake dropped from the catwalk like a predator. There was no struggle, just the muffled sound of a heavy body hitting a mat and the hiss of a zip tie being pulled tight. Kyle was gone before his friends even noticed the silence was too deep. "Kyle," Quentin called out, his voice losing its edge. "Stop messing around, man. It's not funny." I stepped out onto the edge of the catwalk, right into the red light of the exit sign. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to recognize the broken-down father they had mocked. "He's not laughing, Quentin," I said. My voice wasn't a shout. It was a low, vibrating growl that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The three men below spun around, squinting into the darkness. Quentin reached for his waistband, pulling a Glock. He was fast, but he was a civilian-grade shooter. I didn't even flinch. From a darkened corner of the gym, a red laser appeared on Quentin's forehead, then another on his chest. "I wouldn't," I cautioned. "The men holding those lasers don't miss. And they're much less patient than I am." Quentin froze. He looked at the red dots, then up at me. The smugness was gone, replaced by a pale, sickly look of realization. He knew he wasn't looking at a grieving father. He was looking at a tier 1 operator in his natural habitat. "Who are you?" Quentin stammered, his gun hand shaking. "I'm the man who's going to make you wish you'd stayed in that video," I said, jumping down from the catwalk and landing silently 10 feet in front of him. "You touched my daughter to please a man like Logan. You thought a video would humiliate me, but all you did was give me a reason to stop pretending I'm a civilian. Look, man, it was just a job." One of the other thugs, Dominic, pleaded, holding his hands up. "Logan said you were just some guy holding out on a contract. We didn't know. You didn't know who I was." I finished for him. "That's the problem with men like you. You only respect what you're afraid of. Blake, clear the room." Within seconds, the remaining 3 were face down on the concrete, their hands bound behind their backs with industrial-grade restraints. We didn't use handcuffs. We used the stuff they use for high-value detainees in war zones. They wouldn't be breaking out of these. I knelt down in front of Quentin, grabbing him by his hair and forcing him to look at me. "Where are the other 4? "I don't know," he spat, though his eyes were darting toward the office at the back. I leaned in close, my breath cold against his ear. "I've spent months in interrogation rooms with people who actually had something to die for. You're just a bully with a paycheck. Don't lie to me again." I pulled out my phone and played the video of the attack. I played the part where he laughed as my daughter cried. I held the screen an inch from his face. "Every time you lie, I'm going to show you a piece of this video," I said. And then my friend Victor, who is currently sitting on a roof half a mile away with a .338 Lapua, is going to start taking out Logan's associates one by one. And I'll tell them it was your idea. Quentin's bravado crumbled. "They're at the docks. Warehouse 14. They're loading a shipment for Logan. It's illegal, some kind of high-end tech he's smuggling out to fund his resort. Please, man, just let us go. We were just following orders." "Following orders is what soldiers do," I said, standing up and wiping my hands on my tactical pants. You're just trash that needs to be collected. I turned to Blake. Load them into the van. Take them to the mill. Hunter needs to interview them further about Logan's offshore accounts. I want every cent Logan has ever touched moved into a trust for Violet's recovery. What about the warehouse? Blake asked. I'll handle the warehouse, I said. I want to see the look on the other four's faces when they realize the weak father found them in less than 3 hours. As Blake and the team began hauling the men out, I walked over to the gym's office. I found the server for their security cameras and pulled the hard drive. I didn't want any evidence of our visit, but I did want the footage of Quentin crying on the floor. I sent a quick text to Brooke. No words this time. Just a photo of Quentin's wrist tattoo, now covered in road rash and zip-tied. The reply came back almost instantly. What is this? Julian, if you're trying to threaten me, Logan has the police on speed dial. I smiled for the first time that night. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep walk into a trap. Let him call them, I whispered. By the time the police show up, there won't be anything left of his empire to protect. I walked out of the gym and back to my truck. The first phase was complete. The 8 masked men were now down to 4, and the fear was officially beginning to spread. Logan and Brooke thought they were playing a game of chess. They didn't realize I had already flipped the table and started a war. The drive to the docks was a blur of neon lights and cold determination. Warehouse 14 was a massive, rusted structure on the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by stacks of shipping containers that created a perfect labyrinth for someone with my training. In the SEALs, we called this the kill box. If you knew how to move through the shadows, the environment became your greatest weapon. I checked my comms as I pulled the truck into a dark alleyway 300 yards from the target. Hunter, give me eyes. Satellite feed is blocked by the roof, but I've bypassed the local pier cameras. Hunter's voice crackled in my ear. I see a black sedan and a cargo truck at the loading dock. For targets confirmed. They're moving crates. They look nervous, Julian. Quentin hasn't been answering his radio, and they're starting to smell the smoke. Good, I muttered, checking the chamber of my suppressed sidearm. Let them sweat. I didn't take the front entrance. I scaled a stack of containers and dropped onto the roof of the warehouse, moving toward a rusted skylight. Looking down, I saw the remaining 4 men from the video. They were younger than Quentin, muscle for hire who thought wearing a mask made them invincible. They were tossing crates of high-end electronics into the back of the truck, checking their watches every 30 seconds. One of them, a guy named Felix with a bleached blonde buzz cut, stopped and wiped his forehead. Where the hell is Quentin? He was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago to sign off on this manifest. Maybe he's celebrating early. Another one replied, leaning against the truck. That video he sent the old man was classic. Did you see the look on that guy's face in the hidden cam footage? Total ghost. He looked like he was about to cry. I gripped the edge of the skylight, my knuckles turning white. They were laughing about my daughter again. They were standing in a warehouse full of stolen goods, working for a man who wanted to ruin my life, and they felt safe. Victor, status, I whispered. In position on the water tower, Victor replied from his perch 500 yards away. I have a clear line of sight through the open loading door. I can drop the 2 by the truck before they even hear the glass break. Negative. No shots yet, I ordered. I want them to see who's coming. Cut the power to the pier. A second later, the entire dock went pitch black. The humming of the industrial refrigerators died, and the security lights outside flickered out. Down below, the 4 men froze. Not again, Felix hissed, reaching for a flashlight. The grid must be blowing all over the city. He clicked on his heavy-duty flashlight, the beam cutting through the dusty air of the warehouse. He swung the light around the room, searching for the circuit breaker. When the beam hit the crates, it was fine. When it hit the floor, it was fine. But when he swung the light toward the center of the room, he stopped. I was standing right there. I hadn't made a sound as I descended the fire escape. I stood in the middle of the warehouse, my arms crossed, my tactical vest reflecting the harsh light of his torch. I looked like a demon born from the shadows. "Who are you? Get out of here," Felix yelled, his voice cracking. He reached for a crowbar resting on a crate. "I'm the man you called a ghost 2 minutes ago," I said, my voice echoing off the corrugated metal walls. "And you're right about one thing. I am coming for you." The other three scrambled toward me, but they were clumsy. They moved like street brawlers, while I moved like a predator. As Felix lunged with the crowbar, I stepped inside his guard, catching his wrist and twisting it until the bone groaned. With a quick strike to his throat, he went down, gasping for air. The other three hesitated. One of them pulled a serrated knife. "There's 4 of us, old man. You're dead." "I like those odds," I said. I didn't give them a chance to coordinate. I moved like a whirlwind of controlled violence. A palm strike to a nose, a sweep of the leg, a tactical takedown that left the second man unconscious on the concrete. The third man tried to run for the door, but a red laser suddenly appeared on his chest, centered right over his heart. He froze mid-step, his hands flying into the air. "Don't move." Victor's voice came over the warehouse's internal intercom system, which Hunter had hacked. "The next thing that enters your body won't be air." The fourth man, the one who had mocked me by the truck, fell to his knees. "Please, we didn't do anything. It was Logan. He told us to do it. He said you were a nobody." I walked over to him and grabbed him by the collar, hoisting him up until his toes barely touched the floor. "A nobody? I've spent 20 years protecting people like you from monsters you can't even imagine. And then you come into my home? You touch my daughter?" I threw him against the side of the truck. "You're going to call Logan. Right now." He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he dropped it twice. I picked it up and dialed the number for him. I put it on speaker. "Felix? Is the shipment secure?" Logan's voice came through, sounding annoyed. "I'm at the gala. I don't have time for—" "The shipment is gone, Logan," I said, stepping over the groaning bodies of his hired help. "And so are your men." There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end. I could hear the muffled sounds of a violin and clinking glasses in the background, the sound of the high society world Logan thought he belonged to. "Julian." Logan's voice was suddenly stripped of its confidence. "What did you do? Where is Quentin?" "Quentin is learning what it feels like to be a prisoner," I said. "And these 4? They're currently lying on a warehouse floor waiting for the feds to arrive. I've already sent the manifest of your stolen tech shipment to the Department of Justice. By morning, your assets will be frozen, and your charity will be a crime scene. You can't prove anything." Logan snarled, though I could hear the panic rising in his chest. "I have the best lawyers in the state." "Lawyers can't help you with what's coming next, Logan," I said. "You sent me a video to humiliate me. You wanted me to watch my daughter suffer. Now, it's my turn to record. I'm going to film the moment your world collapses. And I'm going to make sure Brooke is there to see it." I hung up before he could respond. I looked at the 4 men on the floor. "Blake, get the van," I said into my comms. "Wrap them up and take them to join their friends. I want all 8 of them in one room. It's time they had a reunion." "Copy that, boss," Blake replied. As I walked out of the warehouse, I saw the blue and red lights of the police in the distance. Hunter had timed the anonymous tip perfectly. The cargo truck full of illegal hardware was enough to sink Logan's company overnight. I sat in my truck and watched as the police swarmed the pier. My phone buzzed. It was a picture from Hunter. It showed Brooke and Logan leaving the gala, surrounded by reporters and a few men in suits who looked like federal agents. Brooke looked terrified. Logan looked ruined. But this was only the beginning. The 8 masked men were dealt with, but the true betrayers, the ones who shared my life and my bed, were still standing. "Part 4 is closed," I whispered, shifting the truck into gear. Time to start the interrogation. The city felt different tonight. To the thousands of people sleeping in their beds, it was just another Tuesday. But to me, the air felt electric. charged with the scent of a hunt nearing its end. I pulled my truck into the parking garage of a nondescript apartment complex on the edge of the financial district. This was where Logan kept his shadow office, a place not listed on any corporate filings. My team had already moved the 8 men to a secure basement facility at the mill, but they weren't my primary focus anymore. They were just tools, blunt instruments used by a man who thought he was a surgeon. I needed to see the surgeon. I needed to see the woman who had helped him pick the scalpel. "Hunter, give me a status on the gala cleanup," I said, tapping my earpiece as I stepped out of the truck. "It's a bloodbath, Julian. Not the physical kind, but the career kind," Hunter replied. "The feds didn't just seize the warehouse. They hit Logan's primary server at the same time. His legal team is scrambling, but it's hard to fight a war when your bank accounts show a balance of 0. He's currently headed to his penthouse with Brooke. They think they're going there to pack and run. They won't get far," I said, walking toward the elevator. "Is the perimeter secure?" "Victor is on the roof across the street. Blake is in the lobby disguised as security. You're clear to enter." "But Julian, Brooke just called your personal cell 3 times in the last 5 minutes. She's spiraling." I pulled my phone from my pocket and looked at the missed calls. I didn't call her back. I wanted her to feel the silence. In a world of high-speed communication, silence is the most terrifying thing you can give a guilty person. It makes them fill the quiet with their own fears. I reached the penthouse floor. The doors opened to a private foyer with marble floors and gold leaf accents. It was the kind of place built on the backs of people Logan had cheated. I could hear shouting coming from behind the heavy oak double doors. "I told you he was just a veteran, Logan. You said he was a nobody." Brooke's voice was shrill, echoing through the hallway. "How did he find the warehouse? How did he get to Quentin?" "Shut up, Brooke. Just shut up and pack." Logan roared back. "Someone leaked the manifests. Someone sold us out. This isn't about your ex-husband. This is a corporate hit. Julian doesn't have the resources to do this." I pushed the doors open. They didn't even hear me enter over the sound of their own panic. The living room was a mess of open suitcases and scattered jewelry. Brooke was standing by the window, her silk dress wrinkled, her face streaked with mascara. Logan was at a desk, frantically shoving stacks of cash into a leather briefcase. "Actually, Logan," I said, my voice cutting through their argument like a blade. "Julian has exactly the resources he needs." They both froze. Logan's hand stayed inside the briefcase, and Brooke let out a small, strangled gasp. They looked at me as if I were a ghost that had stepped out of the shadows of their conscience. I wasn't wearing my tactical mask anymore. I wanted them to see my face. I wanted them to see the eyes of the man they had tried to break. "Julian," Brooke whispered, her voice trembling. How did you get in here?" "The same way your friends got into my house," I said, walking slowly into the center of the room. "Only I didn't need a mask. And I didn't need to hurt a child to feel powerful." Logan finally found his nerve. He straightened up, trying to reclaim his alpha male persona. "You're trespassing, Julian. I don't care what kind of stunt you pulled at the docks, but you're in over your head now. I'll have you arrested before you reach the lobby." I laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. "Arrested by who, Logan? The police who are currently outside loading your hard drives into a van? Or maybe the feds who just flagged your passport? You're not a power player anymore. You're a liability." I turned my gaze to Brooke. She couldn't even look me in the eye. She stared at the floor, her hands shaking. "I want to know one thing, Brooke," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "The video. You knew they were going to do it. You gave them the code to the security system. You told them where Violet's room was. I just wanted you to sign the papers," she sobbed, finally looking up. "Logan said it would just be a scare. He said no one would get hurt. We just needed you to see that you couldn't protect her, so you'd give up the custody and the land. It was for her own good, Julian. She needs a life in the city, not some old house in the woods." The sheer delusion in her voice was staggering. She had convinced herself that betraying her daughter was an act of motherhood. "You watched that video," I said, stepping closer to her. "I know you did. Hunter found the playback logs on your tablet. You watched it 3 times. Did you feel like a good mother then? When she was screaming for me, and you were sitting in a wine bar with this coward? Julian, stay back. Logan shouted, pulling a small silver pistol from the desk drawer. He wasn't a soldier. He held the gun with 2 hands, his grip white-knuckled and unstable. I'll do it. I'll kill you right here and claim self-defense. I didn't stop walking. I didn't even slow down. Logan, look at the window behind you, I said calmly. Logan glanced back for a fraction of a second. A tiny, pulsating red dot was dancing on the glass, right at the level of his head. He looked back at me, his face turning the color of ash. That's Victor, I explained. He's been watching you for 3 hours. He's been waiting for me to give him a reason to pull the trigger. If that gun moves an inch higher, you won't even hear the shot. Logan's hands began to shake so violently the pistol clattered against the desk. He let go of it as if it had turned red hot. He sank into his chair, the reality of his situation finally crushing him. What do you want? He choked out. I want the truth, I said, pulling a chair out and sitting across from him. I want to know about this special project you were funding with those illegal electronics. And I want the names of the people in the city government who were helping you cover up your accidents. If I tell you, I'm a dead man anyway, Logan whispered. If you tell me, you go to a federal prison where I can't reach you, I countered. If you don't, well, my friends at the mill are very creative with their interrogation techniques. And they're currently very upset about what happened to my daughter. I leaned forward, my face inches from his. This is your only exit, Logan. The 8 masked men have already started talking. Quentin is currently telling Hunter everything about your offshore accounts. You can be the one who cooperates, or you can be the one who takes the fall for everyone. Logan looked at Brooke, then back at me. The love he had for her vanished in an instant, replaced by the survival instinct of a cornered rat. I have a ledger, Logan said, his voice cracking. In a safe deposit box. It has every bribe, every payoff, and the names of the people who authorized the hit on your house. Just keep that sniper away from me. Brooke looked at Logan in horror. Logan, you're going to give them everything? What about us? Logan didn't even look at her. There is no us, Brooke. There's just me trying not to die in a hole. I stood up. The first crack had turned into a total collapse. I had the information I needed to burn Logan's empire to the ground, but I wasn't finished with Brooke yet. The legal system would handle Logan, but Brooke, she was family. And for family, the punishment had to be personal. Get your things, Brooke, I said, walking toward the door. Where am I going? She asked, a flicker of hope in her eyes. To the hospital, I said. You're going to sit by Violet's bed, and you're going to stay there until she wakes up. And when she does, you're going to tell her exactly what you did. And then, you're going to sign a full confession for the police. And if I don't, I stopped at the door and looked back. Then I'll release the unedited video of the attack to every news outlet in the country. I'll make sure the world knows that the woman standing in the background was the one who opened the door. You'll be the most hated woman in America by noon. I walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their greed. Phase 5 was complete. The information was secured. But as I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a priority alert from the mill. Julian, we have a problem. Hunter's voice was tense. One of the men, the 8th one, the one we thought was just a driver? He wasn't a driver. He's a former Spetsnaz mercenary. And he just broke his restraints. The air in the elevator felt like it had been sucked out of the shaft. My pulse, usually a steady drumbeat, kicked into a higher gear. A Spetsnaz mercenary embedded in a group of local thugs? That changed the math instantly. Logan hadn't just hired muscle. He had hired a professional handler to make sure the lesson stuck. Hunter, report. I snapped, stepping into the lobby. How did he get loose? And where are the others? He didn't just get loose, Julian. He was waiting. Hunter's voice was strained. The sound of heavy furniture being dragged echoed in the background. He dislocated his own thumb to slip the zip ties. He took out Blake in the transition bay. Blake's breathing, but he's out cold. The merc, his name is Victor, or at least that's the alias he used, is moving through the ventilation system of the mill. He's hunting us in our own house. Lock down the hospital wing. I ordered, my mind racing through the blueprints of our safe house. If he gets to the server room, he can wipe the confession logs from Quentin and the others. I'm 10 minutes out. Don't engage him alone, Hunter. He's looking for a body count to cover his escape. I sprinted to my truck, the tires screaming as I tore out of the parking garage. This was the danger of underestimating an enemy. Logan was a coward, but his money had bought a shark. I dialed Victor, my Victor, who was still on the roof across from Logan's penthouse. Change of plans, Vic abandoned Overwatch. Get to the mill. We have a live wire in the basement. Former Russian Special Forces. He's compromised the bay. On it, Victor replied, his tone chillingly calm. I'll be on the ridge in 5. The drive to the old mill felt like an eternity. My mind kept flickering back to the video. I remembered the 8th man now. He was the one who never spoke. He was the one who stayed in the shadows of my kitchen, watching the exits while the others played at being tough guys. He wasn't there to humiliate me. He was there to ensure the tactical success of the hit. He was the insurance policy. As I pulled up to the rusted gates, the mill was eerily dark. No security lights, no humming of the perimeter fence. He had cut the power. I stepped out of the truck, moving with a silence that had been drilled into me through 1,000 night ops. I didn't use a flashlight. I pulled my night vision goggles from my tactical bag and slipped them over my eyes. The world turned into a grainy, ghostly green. The side entrance was hanging off its hinges. Not blown open, but picked in pride. Professional. I stepped inside, my boots making no sound on the concrete. The smell of ozone and copper, blood, was thick in the air. Hunter, I'm inside. I whispered into the comms. Status. I'm in the server room. I've got a puncture wound in my shoulder, Hunter gasped. He's fast, Julian. He's using a ceramic blade. No metal signature. He's trying to get the drive with the Logan ledger. Hold your position. I'm coming to you. I moved through the corridor, my sidearm leveled. Every shadow was a potential threat. I passed the holding cells. 7 of the masked men were still there, huddled in the corners of their cages, weeping like children. They had seen what their driver was capable of, and they were more afraid of him than they were of me. I reached the server room door. It was cracked open. I didn't barge in. I threw a small flashbang simulator, a distraction device, down the opposite hallway. Crack. The sound echoed through the mill. A shadow flickered in the doorway of the server room. I didn't wait. I pivoted and fired 2 rounds into the doorframe to suppress him, then lunged inside. The room was a wreck. Servers had been pulled from their racks, wires hanging like vines. Hunter was slumped against the far wall, his hand pressed to a bleeding shoulder, his pistol aimed at the dark corner behind the main terminal. He's behind the cooling unit. Hunter yelled. I dived behind a heavy desk just as a ceramic knife thudded into the wood where my head had been a second before. The mercenary stepped out of the dark. He was tall, with a shaved head and eyes that looked like they belonged to a shark. He didn't look scared. He looked bored. Julian, he said, his English accented but perfect. Logan told me you were a ghost. I have hunted many ghosts in my life. Most of them bleed just like men. You touched my daughter, I said, my voice a low, vibrating growl. There isn't a hole deep enough in Russia to hide you from what I'm going to do. I did not touch the girl. The merc replied, circling the room. That was the work of amateurs. I was there to ensure the perimeter. But tonight I will finish the job. Logan is a fool, but his money cleared my account before you froze it. I have no reason to leave you alive. He moved with a speed that was almost unnatural. He didn't use a gun. He didn't want the noise to alert the perimeter. He lunged at me with a second blade, a curved karambit. I blocked his strike with the frame of my pistol, the metal sparking against the ceramic. We traded blows in the cramped space, a brutal dance of elite training. He was younger and faster, but I was fueled by something he didn't understand. Every time his blade grazed my skin, I saw Violet's face. Every time he tried to break my guard, I heard her scream from that video. I caught his wrist, twisting it back while slamming my elbow into his jaw. He didn't go down. He spat blood and kicked my legs out from under me. As I hit the floor, he loomed over me, the blade descending. Fut! A single, suppressed shot rang out. The mercenary's shoulder exploded in a spray of red, and he was thrown back against the server rack. Victor was standing in the doorway, his sniper rifle leveled with terrifying precision. "You're late," I grunted, scrambling to my feet. "Traffic was light," Victor replied, his eyes never leaving the mercenary. The Russian looked at the three of us. Hunter, bleeding but standing, Victor, the silent reaper, and me. For the first time, the boredom in his eyes was replaced by the realization that he was outmatched. Even a Spetsnaz wolf can't survive a pack of seals. "Finish it," the merc whispered, clutching his ruined shoulder. "No," I said, stepping over to him and kicking the ceramic blade away. "That would be too easy. You're the one who's going to tell the world exactly who Logan is. You're the missing link between a greedy businessman and international terrorism. You're going to be the reason Logan never sees the sun again." I turned to Hunter. "Patch yourself up and get him in the high-security chair. I want the ledger uploaded to the feds in the next 5 minutes." And Hunter, "Yeah, boss. Make sure he stays awake for the upload. I want him to watch the moment his employer's world turns to ash." I walked out of the room, my suit jacket ruined and my chest heaving. The eighth man was caught. The wall Logan had built around himself was completely gone. But as I walked toward the medical wing to check on Blake, I saw something on the floor that stopped my heart. It was a small, gold locket. It belonged to Violet. It must have fallen off her during the struggle at the house, and the merc had kept it. I picked it up, the cold metal feeling heavy in my palm. The betrayal of Brooke and the greed of Logan had invited this monster into my world. The revenge was almost complete, but the healing, that was going to take a lot longer. The weight of the locket in my hand was the final anchor to my old life. I sat in the dim hallway of the medical wing, watching the steady pulse of the monitor connected to Blake. He was breathing, his concussion treated, but the silence of the mill felt heavier than ever. My team was winning the war, but the deeper I dug, the more the ground beneath me felt like it was made of glass. "Julian," Hunter's voice came over the intercom, sounding more stable now that he'd been patched up. "I'm running the final decryption on the Russian's phone. You need to come to the command center. Now, it's not just about the money, Julian. It's about Brooke." I stood up, the locket clicking shut. When I reached the command center, Hunter looked like he'd seen a ghost. On the main screen, a series of deleted emails had been recovered. They weren't from Logan to the mercenaries. They were from Brooke. "I thought she was just a pawn, Julian," Hunter whispered, his fingers flying across the keys. "I thought she was just a greedy ex-wife following Logan's lead. But look at the timestamps. These emails date back 6 months before she even met Logan." I leaned in, my eyes scanning the text. My heart skipped a beat, then began to thrum with a cold, terrifying rhythm. Brooke hadn't been seduced by Logan's wealth. She had sought him out. She had provided him with the blueprints to my estate and the details of my military pension. But that wasn't the twist. "Keep scrolling," I commanded. Hunter opened a video file labeled insurance. My breath hitched. It was a recording from a hidden camera, but not the one in my house. It was a recording from Logan's own office, months ago. I saw Brooke sitting in Logan's chair, sipping a drink, while Logan paced the room like a nervous employee. "He's too strong, Logan." Brooke's voice on the recording was cold, colder than I'd ever heard it in 10 years of marriage. "If you just ask for the land, he'll say no. If you sue him, he'll fight. You have to break the one thing he actually cares about. You have to make him feel like a failure as a father. Only then will he sign everything over to me. But the men, they might hurt her." Logan's voice was hesitant, almost pleading. "Then let them," Brooke snapped. She's resilient. She'll get over it. But Julian? He won't. He'll be so busy trying to fix her that he won't notice us draining the accounts. Do it on the 14th. I'll make sure the side gate is unlocked. I felt the world tilt. The woman I had shared a bed with, the woman who had carried my child, hadn't just let the masked men in. She was the architect. She had sat there and planned the trauma of her own daughter as a tactical maneuver to get a real estate settlement. Logan wasn't the mastermind. He was just the bankroll. Brooke was the monster. She didn't just watch the video to see if I was okay. I whispered, the realization cutting deeper than any Spetsnaz blade. She watched it to make sure the job was done. She wanted her own daughter broken so she could win a legal battle. Julian, there's more, Hunter said, his voice dropping an octave. Look at the recipient of the last email she sent before you hit the penthouse. Hunter pulled up a sent message. It wasn't to Logan. It was to an offshore account linked to a private extraction team in Eastern Europe. The plan has failed. Logan is a liability. Initiate the cleanup protocol at the hospital. I'll meet you at the extraction point. The hospital. I breathed, my blood turning to ice. Violet. Brooke wasn't sitting by Violet's bed out of guilt. She was there because she was waiting for a second team to arrive, not to save Violet, but to take her. Violet was her last bargaining chip. If she could disappear with our daughter, I would never be able to testify. I would spend the rest of my life searching, and she would have the leverage she needed to keep me silent forever. Victor, get the truck. I roared into the comms. Hunter, alert the hospital security. Tell them to go to code black. Nobody enters or leaves the pediatric wing. I'm already trying, Julian, but the phone lines are down. Hunter yelled back. They've jammed the local cell towers. They're already there. I didn't wait for another word. I sprinted out of the mill, the locket in my hand feeling like it was burning a hole in my palm. The betrayal was no longer about money or land. It was a mother willing to trade her child's soul for a life of luxury. As I tore down the highway at 100 miles an hour, my mind went back to the SEAL creed. I will never fail those with whom I serve. I had served my country, I had served my team, but I had failed to see the enemy in my own home. I'm coming, Violet, I whispered, the speedometer climbing. And this time, I'm not coming as your father. I'm coming as the man your mother should have been afraid of. I could see the hospital lights in the distance, but they were flickering. The cleanup protocol had begun. The power was being cut, just like it had been at the warehouse. Brooke was playing her final hand, thinking she could outmaneuver a man who had survived the most dangerous places on Earth. She thought she knew me. She thought she knew my limits. She was about to find out that when you threaten a SEAL's child, there are no limits. There is only the mission. And the mission was now to ensure that Brooke never walked free again. I saw a black van scream out of the hospital parking lot as I approached. It was moving fast, weaving through traffic. Victor, tell me you're on the ridge, I barked. I'm here, Julian. Victor's voice was steady, the sound of a bolt action cycling in the background. I have the van in my sights. Do I take the tires? No, I said, my voice dripping with a cold, dark fury. Take the engine block. I want them alive. I want her to see me coming. The shot rang out in my earpiece, followed by the screech of metal and the smell of burning rubber. The van spun out, slamming into a concrete divider just a mile from the hospital. I slammed on my brakes, sliding my truck to a halt just feet from the wreckage. I stepped out, my sidearm drawn, the moon reflecting off the barrel. The side door of the van kicked open, and Brooke stumbled out, her face bruised from the impact, clutching a terrified Violet to her chest. Stay back, Julian. Brooke screamed, her eyes wide with a frantic, animalistic terror. I'll tell them you did this. I'll tell them you're the one who went crazy. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking, the silence between us louder than the sirens in the distance. The twist was over. The truth was out. And now, the debt was due. The smoke from the van's crushed radiator curled into the night sky, smelling of burnt coolant and failure. I stood in the middle of the highway, my shadow long and jagged under the flickering streetlights. 10 feet away, Brooke was backed against the concrete barrier, holding Violet so tightly the poor girl was gasping for air. Violet's eyes were wide, darting between the mother who had betrayed her and the father who looked like a stranger in his tactical gear. "Let her go, Brooke," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the rage that was screaming inside me. It was the voice I used when a mission had gone sideways and I needed to stabilize the environment. "You're done. There are no more moves. Hunter has the emails. He has the video from Logan's office. The world knows exactly who you are. You don't understand." Brooke shrieked, her voice cracking as she looked around for the extraction team that was never coming. Logan was going to lose everything. I was trying to secure our future. If I didn't do it, he would have found someone else who would have been much worse. Worse than 8 men beating her in her own bedroom. I took a step forward. Worse than the mother who unlocked the door? "There is nothing worse than you, Brooke." Behind her, the 2 mercenaries from the cleanup team tried to crawl out of the front of the van. They were dazed, blood streaming from their foreheads. Before they could even reach for a weapon, 2 red laser dots appeared on their chests. They froze instantly. "Don't even think about it." Victor's voice boomed from the hidden speakers on my truck, which was linked to his comms. "The next round goes through your skulls." The mercenaries slumped back, their hands raised. They were professionals. They knew when they were beaten. Brooke, however, was a different kind of animal. She was a narcissist who couldn't accept defeat. She pulled a small, jagged piece of glass from the wreckage and held it near Violet's arm. She wasn't going to kill her, but she was using her as a human shield. "I'm leaving, Julian. I'm taking her, and we're going to the airport," she cried. "If you try to stop me, I'll tell the police you attacked us. I'll tell them you're a dangerous, unstable veteran." "Dad." Violet's voice was a tiny, broken whisper. It was the first time she had spoken since the attack. "Dad, please." That whisper hit me harder than any bullet ever could. I felt the last shred of my patience evaporate. I didn't rush her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, gold locket I'd found at the mill. I held it up so the moonlight caught the gold. "Do you remember what you told her when you gave her this, Brooke?" I asked, my voice low. "You told her that as long as she wore this, she was never alone. That her family would always protect her." Brooke's eyes flickered to the locket. For a split second, I saw a flash of the woman I used to know, but it was quickly replaced by the cold greed that had consumed her. "Family is a lie, Julian," she spat. "It's just a cage. I wanted a life that mattered. I wanted power. I wanted to be more than just a soldier's wife waiting for a man who might never come home." "Then you should have left me," I said. "You should have taken the divorce and walked away. But you wanted the land. You wanted the money. You wanted it all, and you didn't care who you had to break to get it." I looked past her at the horizon. The sirens were getting closer. Not just the local police, but the black SUVs of the federal task force Hunter had alerted. I had sent them the Logan Ledger and Brooke's emails 10 minutes ago. "The noose is tight, Brooke," I said, tucking the locket back into my vest. "You can give me my daughter and surrender, or you can watch as the feds take you down in front of her. Either way, you are never touching her again." Brooke looked at the flashing lights in the distance, then back at me. She saw the iron resolve in my eyes. She saw the red dots on her hired help. She realized that the ghost she had tried to humiliate wasn't just a man. He was a force of nature she had foolishly invited into her life. Her grip on Violet loosened. She sank to her knees, the piece of glass falling from her hand and shattering on the asphalt. She didn't cry. She just stared at the ground, her face a mask of bitter resentment. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "That's the only honest thing you've said in years." I moved forward and pulled Violet into my arms. She buried her face in my tactical vest, sobbing uncontrollably. I held her head, shielding her eyes from the sight of her mother being forced into handcuffs by the arriving officers. Hunter and Blake pulled up in a second vehicle, stepping out to assist the feds. Blake, still sporting a bandage on his head, walked over to the mercenaries, and began the process of securing them for transport. "We got the offshore accounts, Julian," Hunter said, walking over to me. "Every penny Logan and Brooke try to hide. We've already started the process of transferring it into a protected trust for Violet's medical expenses and education. They're going to be broke before they even reach the precinct." "Good," I said, stroking Violet's hair. "And the Spetsnaz merc?" "He's talking. He's naming names in the city council. Logan's entire political network is falling like a house of cards." I looked at Logan's penthouse in the distance, the lights still visible against the dark sky. A few hours ago, he was a king. Now he was just another inmate. Brooke was being led away, her head held high in a final, pathetic display of pride. She didn't look back at her daughter once. "It's over, baby," I whispered to Violet. "They're gone. They can't hurt you anymore." But as I watched the police cars drive away, I knew the war wasn't entirely over. The physical threats were neutralized, but the psychological scars were deep. And there was still one more thing I had to do. I had to face the man who had started it all, the man who thought he could buy my soul with a real estate contract. I turned to Hunter. "Take her to the safe house. Stay with her. Don't let anyone in except Victor or Blake." "Where are you going, boss?" Hunter asked. "I have a final meeting with a businessman," I said, my eyes turning as cold as the ocean. "He's currently being held at the Central Precinct, and he thinks his lawyers are going to save him. I need to disabuse him of that notion." I climbed back into my truck. The noose was tight, but I wanted to be the one to pull the lever. Logan needed to understand that some things in this world are not for sale, especially not a father's love. The precinct was buzzing when I arrived. Reporters swarmed the steps, shouting questions about the Logan conspiracy. They didn't know half of it yet. Inside, the air reeked of fear, sweat, and cheap coffee. Everyone was moving fast. Agents, tech teams, and lawyers who suddenly realized their golden client wasn't as invincible as his press releases made him out to be. I walked through the front doors without hesitation. The badge around my neck wasn't police-issued. It was a federal operations pass Hunter had quietly arranged using contacts I'd earned over the years. Nobody asked questions when a man like me walks in with that kind of pass and that kind of stare. Logan sat in an interrogation room, his expensive suit rumpled, his manicured hands trembling as he scrolled through breaking news headlines on the wall monitor. Corruption probe targets Apex developments. Fed sees accounts tied to political bribery network. Mystery ex-SEAL whistleblower sparks national investigation. He looked up when I stepped into the room, his face lit with feigned confidence, then quickly fell into the hollow-eyed look of a man about to lose everything he's ever built. "Julian," he muttered, masking his panic with a strained smile. "You really think you've won? You can't even comprehend the storm that's coming for you. These people, politicians, partners, they don't go down quietly. You've signed your own death warrant." I sat across from him, placed a folder on the table, and leaned forward. "Death doesn't scare me, Logan. Losing faith in the people I trusted did. But that ship already sank." I flipped the folder open. Inside were photographs, the masks from his hired thugs laid out in evidence bags, the Russian merc bleeding in federal custody, broken handcuffs being loaded into a transport van. Logan's jaw clenched as he realized the hierarchy he'd built on intimidation and manipulation had collapsed. "Your operation died the moment you touched my daughter," I continued. "You thought you were untouchable. You thought the law, the press, the money, all those tools, made you God. But you forgot men like me exist outside your system. You live in papers and contracts. I live in plans and consequences." Logan gripped the table's edge. "You can't keep me here. You think you've painted a hero's story? Wait until every headline calls you a psychopath for going full commando over a personal vendetta. Nobody will know your side, Julian. They'll destroy your name." "That's fine," I said calmly. "Heroes need a public. I don't. I just need closure." I reached into the folder again and slid a small USB drive across the table toward him. It was labeled Lesson Learned.mp4. He stared at it, face draining of all color. Recognize the file name? I asked quietly. That's the video your team sent to me. The one you called insurance. I changed it. I've added my own footage. Your confession, your ledger, your words to the mercenary, Brooks meeting tapes. It's all in there. Sent to multiple networks on a time lock. Even if I die, even if every one of your friends lawyers up, by sunrise the entire world will know who you really are. You wouldn't. I leaned back, cutting him off. I already did. He slammed his fists down, shouting threats that bounced uselessly off the soundproofed walls. Outside, I could see two federal marshals watching through the observation glass, waiting for me to finish. When he stopped yelling, I studied him for a long, silent beat. You know what's funny? I said at last. You always told Brooke the secret to success was controlling the narrative. She believed you. She actually thought by destroying our family, she'd own the story. But standing here, I finally realize, people like you never write stories. You only ever become the villain. I stood up. And villains don't get epilogues. I opened the door, signaling the marshals. As they stepped in, Logan lost control completely, lunging across the table at me. It was pathetic. He barely grazed my arm before hitting the floor, restrained in seconds. Still, he kept screaming my name, his voice echoing down the corridor as they dragged him away. By the time I reached the parking lot, the night sky was tinted red by flashing lights. Victor leaned against my truck, arms crossed, the wind tugging at his jacket. It's done. It's done, I confirmed. By morning, the press will bury him and anyone who stood with him. Victor nodded slowly. Brooke? She's in protective custody until the trial. She'll face every question live on record. No plea deals. No shadows left to hide in. I looked out over the city skyline, the same horizon Brooke once said represented freedom. To me, it looked hollow now, a glass palace full of people pretending they couldn't see the dirt holding it up. Victor handed me a thermos of coffee, his version of comfort. You going back to the safe house? Yeah. She should wake up soon. When I walked into Violet's hospital room later, the chaos seemed far away. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the faint rhythm of her breathing. She stirred when I sat beside her, blinking slowly before focusing on me. Dad? She whispered. I smiled faintly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Hey, kid. I'm here. Her eyes filled with tears. Is it over? I squeezed her hand. Yeah, I said, voice rough. It's over. But as I sat there, I realized the truth. The kind of war I'd fought doesn't ever really end. It just changes shape. Justice doesn't erase pain. Revenge doesn't heal scars. But it gives meaning to them. When the dawn broke outside, painting the city gold, I took something from my pocket and placed it in Violet's hand, the gold locket. It's safe now, I whispered. You're safe. She held it close, smiling weakly. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. The monster had been unmasked. The ghosts had gone back to sleep. And yet, as the light filled the room, I looked at my reflection in the window and thought, once you wake the ghost, he never really goes back to sleep. Sunlight spilled across the hospital room the next morning, soft and golden, touching every piece of sterile metal like it was trying to heal what the night had broken. Violet was propped up in bed now, coloring quietly with one hand while 4 tubes snaked from the other. Her face still carried faint bruises, but her eyes, those same gray eyes her mother once had, held something brighter now, peace. I sat beside her, feeling the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from the weight of finally setting down a lifetime of burdens. The city outside was waking up, reporters scrambling for quotes, politicians scrambling for lawyers, and somewhere in a federal cell, Logan was finally facing the silence he'd spent years running from. Dad, Violet looked up at me. Are they gone for good? I smiled faintly. They are, and they won't come back. People like them never win forever. They just pretend longer than most. She nodded, thinking about that. Then she said something that cut cleaner than any knife. You didn't look scared, even when you came for me. You looked different. I met her gaze. That's because sometimes, sweetheart, when people try to break your heart, they forget your heart is armor. You don't run from fear. You walk through it until it has nowhere left to hide. A soft knock came at the door. Hunter and Victor stood there, both in civilian clothes for once, coffee in hand. Hunter gave a two-finger salute. You did it, boss. The courts froze every dirty account tied to the operation. Brooke took a plea. Federal time. Logan's going down twice as hard. Victor added, and the press? They're calling it the ghost file. You're trending worldwide without even showing your face. I shook my head with a tired grin. That's the point. It was never about being seen. It was about making sure no one like them ever touches someone innocent again. Hunter left a small envelope on the table. That's the deed transfer. The house is yours, completely yours. Brooke's name is erased, legally and otherwise. When they left, I opened the envelope. The document was simple. The land, the coastline, everything I'd fought to protect now belonged to one name. Violet Hale. My daughter. My reason. I turned to her. You're never going to have to fight this fight, okay? The world's heavy enough. You just live. She smiled and held out the gold locket, freshly polished. Can you fix this? I took it gently, snapping the clasp back into place. The hinge clicked perfectly, a tiny, honest sound in a world full of lies. I placed it around her neck again. It glimmered in the early sunlight. Outside, a breeze stirred the hospital curtains. The world felt new, not because it had changed, but because I finally had. For the first time in forever, the ghost could rest. As I stood, Violet leaned against her pillow and said softly, Dad, what are we going to do now? I looked out the window, watching morning light hit the ocean far beyond the skyline. We start over. Maybe plant something green where something ugly used to be. Maybe protect people who can't protect themselves. Ghosts don't haunt, they guard. There was a pause. She smiled, eyes closing. That sounds nice. It was. It really was. And as I stood there, one last thought struck me. Simple, haunting, beautiful. If forgiveness is freedom, do we lose ourselves when we finally let go? What do you think? Would you have forgiven, or would you have done the same? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know your city or country. If this story moved you, tap that like button gently. It tells me you felt something. Subscribe so you don't miss the next thrilling and emotional revenge tale we'll unravel together. Stay safe, fight your battles with heart, and meet me again here soon for another thriller full of loyalty, betrayal, and redemption. Until then, take care out there.